Okay, it is exactly 8:30 p.m. Central Standard Time, Tuesday, June 9th, 2020. And I told you that the quarter would go fast. We're week five. In 10 more days, this course will be over. Week five. So I hope you guys are all doing fine with the pandemic, and seems like the civil unrest has changed a little bit to peaceful protests the way it should be. So I'm happy about that. And so let's get let's get right to the module. Some students that are usually here aren't here because they're dealing with the storm down there in Florida. So we got at least one student that has already reached out to me concerning that. So all right, so let's go down, and you can see our week five lecture today. We have next one, final one, next Tuesday. And before we get to the announcement, let's take a look at the course calendar. Course calendar, this is where we are. So your initial post is due tonight on drunk driving. And then your reply post is due the 13th, which is Saturday. And then your written assignment, has a hate crime been committed? We'll talk about that. Is due Sunday the 14th, along with your, um, here we go, along with the classroom key phrase that I'll be giving out. And then next week, Monday, is it. The course ends that Friday. That's why I say 10 more days from today. It is not going to end on the 21st. I say that every week, but I still say it. And I guarantee you, there's going to be students that miss it. They're still going to be trying to submit their assignments on the 20th and 21st. They're going to try to do their reply post for week 6 on the 20th, and they're not going to be accepted. They're going to try to submit their assignments on the 21st, and they're not going to be accepted. I cannot by school rule. It's very clear. And here it is. Quarter ends at 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time on June 19th. All right. I have graded um, most of the papers for week 3, and I did all the discussion posts. I got about 10 more to do. I'll be doing those tonight, get those completed, then start to work on week 4. Okay. Get those done by the weekend or through the weekend, because next week I'm going to have grading for weeks 5 and week 6 that's going to be done. Just for your information, all final grades that I submit will be on the 22nd. That'll be by 11:59 p.m. Central Standard. All final grades will be in. All right. Don't confuse that though with the final day of class. So, all right, let's close this down. And now let's go to course homepage. Okay, for week 5. So this week we're going to be talking about crimes against moral values. Um, chapter 7 of the text. I already sent you the PowerPoints and information that you need. We're going to talk about drug laws, drunk and drugged driving, distracted driving, hate crimes, and then we're going to deal with the practice sessions uh, because next week is the week that you actually have your final exam. Remember, as I said already, that the exam that takes place week 6 will be covering weeks 4, 5, and 6. Those are the sections, and the best way to prepare is to go over these little practice things along with the PowerPoints and things like that. Your discussion post, drunk driving, initial post due tonight, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard, and your reply post due Saturday, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard. Your written assignment, has a hate crime been committed? We're going to talk about that. Is also due this Sunday. And then you guys know about my motto. So let's take a look at the module itself. Look at the assignments. So drunk driving, you're going to use this scenario. And then for your initial post, you're going to determine, has a crime of drunk or drug driving been committed? If so, by the male, the female, or both. Explain your position. Explain what enforcement action you would take. What would you do with the truck? Then in your reply post, examine another student's post that may contrast with yours and defend your position regarding the questions that you addressed in your initial post. Okay? Now, your written assignment is again a 3-part. You always have multiple sections. Now, I want to tell you up front, hear me good and hear me well. Each of these parts need to be a minimum of 1 page. 1 page. It should start on a page and end on a page. This is a 3-part assignment. You're not going to do 1 part or 2 parts. It's a 3-part. And so each part should be a minimum of 1 page. Okay? You'll see that in the rubric. And each part should have citations throughout the paper. Student said to me that I didn't know I had to have citations throughout the paper. I said, that means you don't listen. The point of the matter is it follows the rubric because citations are very important. Citations provide support to your statements in your papers. I talk about this all the time. It's a habit that you need to get. And what I've seen some students do is give me what I call a gratuitous citation in the paper. And don't rely on the textbook. I want the key thing in all of these written assignments is to help you to strengthen your ability to research. So having said that, let's make that clear. There's no issues. So you don't have to have separate reference pages. You just have to have 1 reference page at the end. So anyway, so we're dealing with moral values and what we call, quote, I call them victimless crimes. There is no such thing, but what they're trying to say is that the crimes that these people commit are crimes on themselves. However, though, there are victims, and victims are usually other people. For example, with crimes of drugs, people commit crimes, primarily property crimes, to get items to support their drug habits. And so if you take the drug and crime course, you hear me talk about that constantly, but it is evident that you should recognize up front. That is why one of the issues, if you hear these people talking about defunding the police department, I think the term is is not really what people really want to do. You don't want to do away with law enforcement. We don't want to do that. What we want to do is work with helping individuals, um, other than putting them behind bars. In other words, address the problems. And so when they say defund the police department, what some of these people are really saying, in short, is they want to redirect some of the funding for law enforcement into programs that will decrease crime. Now, I had a mentor when I was in law school, and I've spoken about him several times in many of my classes. R. Eugene Pencham, who was a noted criminal defense lawyer, and he became a jurist. So he was a criminal court judge at our main criminal court building in Cook County, the Layton Court Building, room 702. And then he became an appellate court judge. And here's what he used to say. He used to say that the criminal justice system does not want to address the causes of individuals committing crimes. Because if you eliminate those individuals, those quote recidivists, those repeat offenders, then there'll be fewer police officers around, or police officers will have to do other things. Well, I submit that what is happening in law enforcement, and if you take the drugs and crime course, you'll see what I'm talking about, where there is what we call a deflection or diversion technique that's taking place, that when people actually are possessing drugs and drug paraphernalia, they can actually go to the police with that on them and not be arrested, but be sent to treatment programs. And I'm not talking about the quote dealers. Most of the dealers that law enforcement on a daily basis have to do with are what we call those users, who are dealers to support their habits. And so what it is that with this deflection program, of which I have provided information in my drugs and crime course, where law enforcement is not arresting these people, but instead taking them to get help. And actually, in essence, they're really doing their job as police officers, because they're enforcing laws, but recognizing that one of the big problems with drug uh, situations is individuals are sick. You don't address people if they have a disease. People that have COVID, they're not arresting them, they're getting them cured. People who have the flu, they're not arresting them, they're getting them cured. So that's why I say that. And so I wanted to pause, put a pin in that, so you can understand. And the future of law enforcement officers is that law enforcement officers, that's why um, educated officers will be the best, because they will understand the clinical needs of many individuals they come in contact with, and will be doing a good job in protecting the community and relieving those individuals. And I would submit that actually there'll be more work for police, and that their duties would be redirected. Because as you know and I know, that when you take a person and you arrest them for drugs, you lock them up, they don't get what I call, quote, adequate treatment. They come back out, they're going to do the same thing. And then ultimately, they're going to possibly do something that will cause their death or somebody else's death, as I've had a few clients that have been in that scenario. So, and so drug abuse, I mean, alcohol abuse, same way, getting people help with AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, and going through the process to take care of it. And people who abuse alcohol will have a tendency to, their biggest crime generally that's a danger to someone is DUI, or driving under the influence. And so if we can ameliorate that problem, if we can address that problem and take care of that problem to the point that we are able to help those individuals. So somebody says, Professor, you sound like you're turning cops into social workers, case workers, um, or clinicians. Well, that should be a part of your job. So, and remember, your job is to serve and protect. And so that fits within the vernacular. The old um, police job is just to arrest people. That's not going to cut it anymore. And then certainly we're not going to go into the excessive force issue because we've already dealt with that. But the point of the matter is that yes, more educated officers will be beneficial to society as a whole and be able to address these drug and alcohol situations. And then um, hate crimes that we're going to talk about in just a few minutes ago, how we deal with those, and I'm going to talk about the specifics of that when we get to that. So anyway, well, hate crimes are committed against people because of their status, because of their race, because of their sex, because their sexual preference, because of their beliefs, religious beliefs, and those kinds of things, designed to intimidate people and to um, uh, create hurt and harm to those individuals. And so we, as people in the criminal justice programs, have to recognize that those individuals need to be dealt with. Hate needs to be dealt with in all aspects, whether it's from the law enforcement aspect, the corrections aspect, probation, parole, all through the whole gamut, and then coming back around to dealing with the individuals that we have. And let's get this thing fixed. Let's ameliorate the word hate, period. Okay, so in this three-part assignment, you're going to play the role of a police officer, of which I have been one, a defense attorney, of which I have been one, and a detective. I was kind of an investigator. And so you're going to write your paper from the perspective that each of these. So, and then you're going to use the scenario here, and then deal with the minimum of one page, and then you're going to cover these issues with research and support to support your papers and statements. Defense attorney perspective, same thing. Okay. And then so you're going to answer these questions, and then with the third part. But make sure that you know, please, when you write your papers, don't give me a paper that I can't tell what part you're writing about. I'm not going to try to guess. It's good if you caption it. That's a real good way to do it. That's good organization. And again, it should start on a page and end on a page. It shouldn't run over to the next page, okay? Unless, I mean, if you want to, you can do that and then start another page with it. So then here's a scenario. So you're using the scenarios different for each one, all right? Each of the three have a different scenario. Just that's all the more reason why I said to separate them. All right, and then you can use your guides that I've been talking about since day one. Um, I think, yeah, yep. You can do 3 different documents. As a matter of fact, that's good organization. Um, yeah, you can put them in a zip folder, though I hate zip folders. The reason why I hate zip folders is because I have to do something different to grade them. It takes longer, but I'm not going to hold that against you if that's the way you do it. I would prefer if you do 3 attachments to the attempt. But that's okay. Some people can't do that. So the answer to your question, Kara, is yes. Yeah, yeah. And I don't penalize people for doing it. I just grit my teeth at them and says, "Ah," you know, okay. You guys know I'm a kidster. You know, I like to joke around. But so anyway, the answer is yes. So let's take a look at the rubric. And the rubric pretty much supports what I just said. And it tells you, see, a minimum of 1 page for this, minimum of 1 page for this, a minimum of 1 page for this. All right. And then, of course, your patented grammar and stuff like that. And then this. If you notice, you should already recognize that the last 2 sections of your rubric are always the same. The elements change in the first parts depending on the specific assignment that we have in here. All right. So, but make sure you have your papers and run them. Enough of your critical thinking in your papers. Cover page, and then, like I said, your references appropriately APA formatted. Any questions? Okay, I think it's pretty clear what my expectations are. What some people do, and this is unfortunate, is that they look strictly at the rubric, and then they think I'm going to grade strictly from the rubric. The rubric is a guideline, okay? But I can deduct points for other things too. Like, for example, using the sole source of your papers, your textbook, or using the module. And the reason for that is because I had a student that says, well, that's not in the rubric. Nope, but it's on the course homepage. As I know you know, because you've pointed this out before in some of my other sessions. And anybody who's had me more than once, like you know, you're the veteran. You can probably help some of your fellow classmates say, this is what he expects. And I'm very consistent with it, you know. So the point of the matter is that um, well, thank you. And you are welcome. Yeah. I appreciate the support of students who are able to assist me in getting my point across, because my ultimate goal, guys, is to make you into individuals who are going to excel above the competition that you're going to have for positions and roles in your employment opportunities. Okay, so let's go back. One student told me, my professors don't go over the assignments because it makes the lecture longer. I says, and then one told me, he says, you go over those little test things. I can do those on my own. So I said to the student, I says, listen, it's up to you. You don't have to come stay. You can leave. But you always give the keyword after all of that. Yeah, because some people will get the keyword and they're gone. I mean, seriously, I have actually had students that I could tell that they said, oh, I didn't get the keyword. I said, or phrase. I said, I talked about it the whole time, as you know. And so, anyway, the bottom line is this is not, lectures are not about just giving you the keyword. This is just a way of getting your recognition, or me recognizing, or you letting me know that you listen to the lecture. Okay, it's for your benefit. I'm not doing the assignment. All right. So anyway, that's week 5 there. So now let's go to the module and let's talk about the topics that are in here. And so we're going to deal with moral values. We're going to deal with hate crimes. We're going to deal with intoxication, drug laws, and those kinds of things. So we're going to talk about this section, this section, this section, and this section. All right. So let's start talking about drug laws. As I said, I don't go into as much detail as I do in the 6 week course, J250, which many students have taken with me. Have you, Kara, have you had that course? Have you had the drugs and crime course with me? Oh, okay, good. So then, you know the in-depth aspects of it. Yeah, last night, yeah, then last night it became um, one of my best modules is week 5 when we do chasing the dragon. You remember that it's about a 45-minute video that has to do with your week 5 final written assignment in that class, and it's such a serious and accurate description of how drugs adversely affect and why we say there's an opioid crisis in this country. And it can bring you to tears there. But you know what? There have been many students in class who have had those experiences with other individuals they knew. I had one student who admitted during the class, not to me, that they had a problem like that, and that they were actually like some of those people in the video, and that they were able to be one of the few who were able to recover. So drugs are very, 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 very dangerous. And yes, you do hurt yourself, but the key thing about it is that uh, drug laws are pretty much imposed uh, to stop people from distributing drugs to individuals. So it says here in this, I take issue with the statement, but I know what they're trying to say. There are no victims in a traditional sense when it comes to drug use, possession, or sale. That is totally not true. Uh, but you know, it says, however, there are instances where innocent people are harmed by drug-related crime. Duh, that's the problem. Is that innocent people, people who don't use the drugs, become victims of robbery, burglaries, and other crimes, and sometimes resulting in their deaths as well. And so, talking about crossfire of drug-related turf, those kinds of things, we're talking about distribution of drugs. But the bottom line is that people will commit crime to support their drug habits. That's my patented phrase, and that is an accurate statement. And so the laws are written to try to help people. It's more it's I tell people it's criminal law, but it really is geared towards health of individuals. And you know, so anyway, because of the devastating aspects that drugs have on individuals, illegal drugs, the government attempts to control it by passing a law. And you know me, um, being a person who understands the law from all perspectives, my professional career, that the key thing about it is to help these individuals get treatment, because the drug cartels and all these organizations that distribute drugs, the gangs and other individuals cannot distribute something where there's no market. It's kind of like some of these big box stores are going under because of online purchasing. So there's no market, or the market is decreasing for people buying in a traditional sense. So if we were to take that same approach to dealing with substance abuse, um, getting people helped, then they wouldn't have customers. And so it would be some time. So anyway, these are the various schedules based on the Schedule 1 drugs are the ones that are most potent and create the most serious injury: heroin, LSD, ecstasy, marijuana. And then they explain the definitions of why they fit in there. But you'll notice that it says in here the first two are high potential for abuse because of the addiction rate that takes place with individuals, and that these drugs are not for medicinal purposes except marijuana. But you and I both know too that marijuana is probably coming off of Schedule 1 because uh, many of the states in this country now have legalized marijuana, not just for medicinal purposes, but for social uses. So it's gonna come off of this. But one of the issues with the marijuana that's under Schedule 1 is that that marijuana generally is not the same stuff that you get from those dispensaries, because that stuff is not laced with all kinds of additives. As when you take the J250, you know what I'm talking about, and Kara, you're familiar with that. Is that it's the they use animal tranquilizer stuff. They use the things that the president, bleach and other disinfectants, and added into it. These additives go into the body and create problems for individuals. Schedule 2, high potential for abuse: oxycodone, fentanyl, opium, and cocaine. And then when we get into cocaine, we specifically deal with the cheap form of cocaine that I've shared many times in my classes, crack cocaine. And that as a village attorney in a town that was a crack cocaine capital of the South Suburbs, I've seen many places where crack cocaine was made a cheap high, and individuals were hooked on that, and they would die because they would try to they'd get a high with crack, and then they want to get back to that high, and they never can. So what they do, they think that if they increase the amount, but what they do is then they adversely affect uh, the body health. Schedule 3, lower potential for abuse. However, they can create other problems: Tylenol with codeine, Suboxone, and ketamine, antibiotic steroids, and so forth and so on. And these are not major issues. The two major problems come in Schedule 1 and 2 drugs. Schedule 4, it says, leads to limited physical or psychological dependence. And what happens is these things will actually be gateways to lead you to oxycodone, and will lead you to opium and heroin. So it'll help you get to climbing up the ladder. And then finally, Schedule 5, uh, cough suppressant and medications and so forth with codeine. And so there are laws that are passed that will deal with each of these issues. I've already talked about the crack cocaine issue, the war on drugs. Those of you who take that class know my position on the war on drugs. Um, it was declared during the Reagan era, so you can just say no. It doesn't work like that. It's not just say no. And it sounds good, but actually it doesn't work like that. And it says here that although the war on drugs continues today, examples of its success can be cited. I don't know where they're talking about that is. The drug problem still exists. and will always exist as long as there's a supply and demand. That's what I was talking about, the supply and demand. Demand, especially, that's for individuals who are addicts, and as long as there's some financial gain that goes about it. Okay. Um, and then dealing with the societal attitudes and so forth. And so you can take a look at the Uniform Controlled Substance Act for more information about the possession and delivery. I represented individuals in drug court. Most of those people that I represented were not like the quote big drug dealers. The big drug dealers didn't end up in drug court. They ended up in the federal court, where I didn't do a lot of Fed stuff. I did a little bit of it, but most of mine was done at the grassroots level, dealing with individuals. Okay. So, from the perspective of controlled substances, there's actually two ways you can operate. There's called what we call actual possession, is when it actually is on you, okay, and it's in your pocket or something like that. Then there's constructive possession, where a person has the ability to control the item, but it's not on them, but it's in like for their car or their house or something like that. So you can go to jail for both of these. And these are some of the statutes that are typical across the country: knowingly possessing a controlled substance analog. So what's a controlled substance analog? Well, it's a it's a similar to one of these scheduled drugs, one or two, but they're designer things like Spice K2, which are similar to marijuana and are controlled substance. These items, which again I refer to the J250 class, you discover you can get those a lot of time in those convenience stores. They look like candy. Matter of fact, they look like chunkies, if you know what a chunky is, or some kind of candy or something like that. And they actually are from China and from Asia, but they're really cheap. And people go out on what we call trips when they ingest those. Okay. And then we start talking about possession of drugs involved in jurisdictions and various laws. The key thing is that higher the quantity of drugs in your possession, the more likely you're going to be arrested for distribution and sale. Nickel bag, for example, or a dime bag, small bag, or a little small amount of drugs, someone with a needle and maybe a little heroin or something like that would not be considered as a dealer. But if you have an amount that appears to be um, for sale, you might use some, but for sale, then the maximum increases. And that, again, is, remember what they're trying to do. They're trying to cut off the flow of these drugs, and therefore you get the most serious sentences. Those people who are straight dealers, and to be honest with you, there's not a lot of that. Most dealers are users, but those that are straight dealers are individuals who get the most time, and they should, because what they do is they will get a person by giving them a sample and then get them started, and then they'll put them out on the streets to sell. They will then also um, take those individuals, and sometimes they will kill them if they don't have enough money to pay for the drugs that they use. So it's pretty bad. Okay. Says Florida and many other states have taken precautions to protect children as well as places where people gather from illicit drugs. Like, for example, it's a bad career move to distribute drugs on school property. There are signs that tell you that, and that's the reason for that, is to protect children. Okay, so that's pretty much what I want to say about drug laws themselves. Uh, any questions? Probably not from you. Okay. All right. Some of the other students who aren't here might. All right. Drug and drug driving. So I already talked about this a little bit, so I'm just going to go through this pretty fast. Drunk driving. Individuals who drive with what is determined as a blood alcohol content of point eight, point zero eight, are deemed under the law to be driving under the influence. And that's determined by the breathalyzer tests and so forth. When I first started practicing law, and that's what we call illegal per se operating a vehicle. When I first started practicing law in 1978, the BAC, or what we call the blood alcohol content, was 0.10, which meant that it was believed that you had to have more than 0.08. However, because of the lobbying of organizations like MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Driving, and other great causes who have arose because they're individuals who take part because they have lost a loved one due to drunk driving. They, the legislature decided in, I'm trying to remember what year it was. I know it was in, I think it was in the 80s or 90s. It may have been in the 90s. But at least, excuse me, um, now all 50 states have 0.08. And, because um, people are killed constantly by drunk drivers. And you know what? There are people who take drinks and they think that they are in control of their vehicles, but it it puts you in a position where it slows down your response time to dealing with situations when you are under the influence. And so consequently, you can create death or serious injury to someone. And so the statistics are pretty high. As it said here, it said that during 1998, the legal limit, okay, so it was before 2000, it was in about 2000 that I think it happened. The blood, the 0.10 blood alcohol content for that time period, more than 15,000 people were killed in fatal crashes. One fatally every 33 minutes. Just think, this lecture takes place usually almost two times that, almost 60 minutes or a little over 60 minutes. There could be two deaths or two instances. But in the 90s, to help reduce the fatality, they began to lower the level. So basically, what the point is this, is that before 1998, there were various jurisdictions who were beginning to uh, make it 0.08 to operate vehicles. However, many states, all states, adopted the 0.8 standard as a per se means in and of itself. So you are deemed to be considered as impaired to drive and operate a vehicle. Okay, and then these are some of the elements: operating a motor vehicle on a highway, parking lot, a driveway accessible to the public while impaired by alcohol. So definitely we start talking about physical control. Now, let me just throw a few questions. If I'm sitting in my car behind the wheel in my driveway, my own driveway, and I'm under the influence, and the vehicle either has one of those push buttons, like my wife has a push button for hers, but her keys are there. Um, is that what we call physical control? Yes or no? It is absolutely correct. And the key thing to be physical under physical control is, as it says, having physical control of a vehicle while under the influence makes it illegal, impaired. And what that means is being in a driver's position in the front seat of a vehicle or in the driver's position of a streetcar or trolley, and having possession of the ignition key or other ignition device. So that's the answer. So if you're sitting there in the driver's seat and there's no keys around or no igniter to start, then you're not considered in physical um, possession. Okay. So the key thing is this: there are people who will be in the driver's seat, and they will be sitting with their cars not running or running, but the keys are right there. That's in physical control of the vehicle, and you can be charged with driving under influence. Says to uh, prove homicide by intoxicated use. So where a person is what we call involuntary manslaughter, operating a motor vehicle while under the influence of a drug or with a blood alcohol content of a 0.08 or if the driver is considered impaired and causes the death of a person. Okay, so there are certain things that you look for. They have what we call field sobriety tests that are performed by law enforcement officers, where they have people, stand on one leg, walk a line, and those kinds of things. But these are some things that I, as an individual, have seen, even when I wasn't in law enforcement, to determine that you watch out for. You see people weaving, driving through a traffic signal, striking a curb. That's usually a dead giveaway that that person is probably driving under the influence. um, uh, the physical appearance of an individual. You can smell the alcohol, the appearance of the eyes, how they speak. Now, I do know, for example, that an individual I know who was stopped by a police officer and had slurred speech, and the person wasn't driving under the influence, but he was arrested for driving under influence. What do you think that what was going on with that person? Yep, it is. But what specific health issue do you think? You're right though. It was a health issue. Yep. This person was having a stroke and a seizure or something like that. Those kinds of things that can happen. Do you not know that people who are diabetic, that they sometimes have the odor of alcohol because the sugar in their body turns into alcohol in their system, even though they didn't drink it, and that can happen as well in those kind of scenarios. Um, I laugh because um, you can. Um, it might. It might. It might. That's why I say it. It might. What I was about to say is that when you use mouthwash, it can mirror that. And sometimes people can blow based on that breathalyzer, not the blood, but the breathalyzer, and that can happen. But the blood will clear up the issue about the other thing that we just got through talking about, the stroke and those kind of things, or diabetics in those situations. There is a very strong mouthwash that you don't use straight. You have to dilute it. It's called Dr. Tishner's. You ever heard of it? You ever heard of Dr. Tishner's? Yeah. Yeah, it's Dr. Tishner's. Tishchner. It is very powerful. However, it's so powerful that you have to read the instructions. You do not take it straight from the bottle. It has to be diluted, because before it reaches the stage of, and you don't ever want to swallow it. But what I'm getting ready to tell you is this, is that it will burn your mouth. I mean, for real, burn your mouth, you know. So, but anyway, sometimes these mouthwash issues happen. I had a case like that. I had a person with the toothpaste that had a high amount of something in it. Field sobriety test, the gaze, the walk and turn, the one-legged test, walk the line, you know, like if somebody said, what line, that kind of thing, those kind of situations. Now, sometimes though, the field sobriety tests are unfair. Like for example, I don't drink, I don't do alcohol at all. But if I was stopped by a police officer and they asked me to do a field sobriety test and stand on one leg and so forth and so on, I wouldn't be able to do it long. But I'm 70, okay? But the point of the matter is that those aren't definitive. They just give some preliminary information. And so anyway, dealing with the chemical tests that take place, drivers are required to agree to breathalyzers by the mere fact of possessing a driver's license. They have what we call implied consent laws, which arrested drivers are given the option to consent to the chemical test or tests. But if you don't do that, what you do is you find yourself with your license suspended. And it says here, penalties are increased for refusal because you're not allowing the prosecution to get the evidence. But there's all kinds of things that have happened, like Missouri versus Neely. Prior to the McNeely case, law enforcement officers could force a blood draw because the scientific established information would dissipate. But the McNeely decision said, wait, isn't that kind of invasive? So law enforcement now have to get a warrant to force a blood draw unless a person gives consent. So let me see what you said. Yeah. They can. And now, with the technology, you can get a warrant pretty fast. They'll send it right away. Uh, Judges are on duty to be able to do that right away. So, yep. So anyway, drugged driving. Now, drug driving has the same effect as drunk, except there's the blood alcohol content issue doesn't come into play. Blowing a breathalyzer doesn't let you know that. But it's illegal per se to prohibit a person from having any quantity of illicit drugs, of course. And you can also drive under influence for not illicit, but your own drugs. Have you ever red on the bottle, and this is really for the protection of the companies that manufacture, distribute um, drugs to individuals legally through prescription. You see a disclaimer on there telling you that this could cause you to um, don't drive and take this. I take amlodipine, which is a for blood pressure, but I've never had an effect like that. But they still put that in there. Uh, so anyway, the key thing is that you can be charged with uh, driving under the influence of drugs. I represented a guy one time who had a situation where he took his medicine twice and didn't realize it. So those kinds of situations do happen. But most of the ones that are driving under drugs are things like, even with the legalization of marijuana, you're going to still have driving under the influence issues because you have alcohol is legal and driving under the influence issues, those kind of things. Okay. For example, did you not know that there are jurisdictions where the driving where marijuana is legal, but that if you get in your car and you drive after that, you can be arrested for driving under the influence of drugs and those kind of things. So I know, I can't remember the case. I used to talk about it when I did this course, and it was an 11-week course. There was a church in Indiana, and I can't remember the name of the church, but it was actually just across the Illinois border, and they actually were legalized to use marijuana in their worship services. The only thing is that when you left the worship service, the police could be out there, and they're not arresting you because of your worship experience. They're arresting you because of the driving under the influence issues. So, well, here's a video that you can take a look at. Sometimes it's pretty detailed. It's pretty good too if you get a chance to take a look at that. So now we're going to talk about distracted driving. Distracted driving takes place from texting. Did you not know that distracted driving can be not just texting? Did you know that even talking on the phone, people have hands-free devices that is now required in most jurisdictions because it takes just a split second for texting, and eating and drinking at the wheel can also create distracted driving situations, though police generally don't stop you for that. But that's one of the issues that's taken into consideration when there is an accident, is what you were doing in your vehicle. Talking with the stereo or either the navigation system that takes your attention from safe driving. One of the things that I never understood is, you know, the GPSs that people put on their dashboard. I still take issue with some of those because it's a screen that you're focusing on and you're taking your eyes off the road. Now, what a lot of manufacturers have done, my wife's car is Mercedes, and it has that in there. It's supposed to be designed based upon the engineers putting it at a level where you can see them both at the same time. But all it takes is a little bit, just a little bit. So the key thing is that things that can cause you to go into a trance. Have you ever driven somewhere and then when you get you're driven from where you left and you're driving and you don't remember passing certain things? You don't remember, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. And the reason why that can happen is because sometimes while we're driving, we're listening to and focusing on the music, focusing on a conversation, or either if we're by ourselves, you actually have times, and I tell people, you kind of you scare yourself because you're not blacked out, but there's a there's some missing stuff there. Okay. Yeah, yeah, kind of daydreaming. Yeah, happens, It happens. There are people at a stoplight I've seen do that kind of thing, and and you do know that when you drive and the light changes, you're not supposed to just take off. You're supposed to stop. You remember you took the test. You're supposed to stop and you're supposed to observe on both sides and make sure, those kind of things. But anyway, the point of the matter is that distracted driving can come about without having any of those things as well. All right. So that's all I'm going to say on that. I want to talk about, I think hate crimes is the last section. Okay, hate crimes are very simply this. The purpose for the crime is you're doing something to a person because of their race, their sex, national origin, or belief. And so the federal government has passed a law actually going way back to 68. While I was 68, I was in high school. And 18 U.S. Code 249. If you see Chapter 18 U.S., that's the federal law where all criminal law, that's the criminal code for the United States. All criminal laws are in 18 U.S. There's some that are tangentially related to it, but most of it is 18 U.S.C. And so Section 249 made it a crime to threaten to use force against a person because of their race, color, religion, or national origin. And then now it's added on to deal with the individual's sexual preference and those kinds of things. And what that does is it elevates the crime. And many states now have hate crime statutes that make it increased sentence for even something as simple as a battery because it's done on that. And how do you determine it? You determine it by something that the person has said while doing the crime. They might have called them a homophobic name, or they may have made a racial slur or a sexist slur, those kinds of things that lead to this. And so, there's a lot of things that have happened in this. Unfortunately, there have been instances of law enforcement officers who are guilty of these kinds of things as well. I used to always tell all of my students, I still do, when you express yourself, don't use cuss words because it's unprofessional. You don't need that to control the situation. You just don't need it. It's like bringing gasoline to a fire. So dealing with Wisconsin and the case of Wisconsin versus Mitchell that came down in 1993, where it says that the defendant, an African American, was sentenced to 2 additional years in prison for intentionally targeting a fight against a white victim. And it was Mitchell's intent to target white victims that was demonstrated by what he said. He said, "There goes a white boy, go get him," just before the action. And so those are the kinds of things that can create the problem. Somebody says, well, is that free speech? Well, actually, no. What you're doing is almost the same kind of thing dealing with your criminal laws, dealing with murder. And when a person says, I'm going to kill so and so, and then they turn around and do it. So it's their own words followed by actions. So anyway, what happened is that the Supreme Court concluded that Mitchell's right to free speech ended when he carried out the act. That's the point. Free speech and thought, even though are protected by, but they cannot allow hate crimes to exist, and that's a good thing. Okay, you can read that case and so forth. And so that's it for any of that. Do you have any questions about any of these things that I've covered so far? All right. So now let's look at some key terms. And the key term, these are things that get you prepared. So as I said, my favorite is to use the flashcards, run Adobe Flash, and then allow it. And then once you do it, it's going to be set. And it says here, intentionally committing a crime against another and selecting the victim or their property in whole and part because of the actor's belief or perception regarding race, religion, color, disability, sexual orientation, national origin, or ancestry. Um, we just got through talking about it. So what is it? It's a what? Yeah, hate crime. Excuse me. A substance that is substantially similar to the chemical structure of a Schedule 1 or 2 drug, such as the designer drugs K2 or spice, which are controlled substantially similar to marijuana and are controlled substance. What do we call them? Starts with an A. Controlled substance analogs. Analogs. Yep. The impaired operation of a motor vehicle while under the influence of illicit drugs and or the misuse of prescription drugs. What is it? Yeah, or drugged driving or drunk driving. Yeah, you have to make sure that you, let's see what they say, impaired operation of a motor vehicle, uh, drugs. So it's drugged driving. Remember if they say alcohol. So, and then the last one I'm gonna do for here is occurs when a person has physical control over a drug, typically on their person. What do we call that? What kind of, that's possession, but what kind? Actual. That's okay. All right. So anyway, you want to go and you want to go ahead and you want to do these. All right. So then next, let's go to the practice for drunk driving and forced drug laws. I think this is the one where I always run into problems trying to get it going. Oh yeah, yeah, this is the one where you're going to have to look at that on your own and dealing with these this scenario here and dealing with the case. Okay. Identity uh, for the drugs and what schedule they are. So you're going to have to take this activity and you're going to determine what the schedule is. Drugs that have acceptable medical use with some restrictions. What do you think? Schedule 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5? Drugs that have acceptable medical use with some restrictions. you think are 3? You think they're 3? Actually, they're here. They're 5. Remember, acceptable medical use. Drugs that have lower potential abuse but may lead to moderate dependence. So what number is that? So it's not going to be 1 and 2, I can tell you that. It's 4. Drugs that have the least potential for physical or psychological dependence. Drugs that have no accepted medical use in the United States. You can get those mixed up, right? Actually, it's 2. And then drugs that have, no accepted medical use. Okay, so it's almost right. So you try again. And so you just keep going through until you figure out which ones actually match. There's 2 that are not, and I know what they are, but I'm not going to go through them. So you want to make sure that you follow those. Just because they connect doesn't necessarily mean that they're right. That's the key thing. So when you're practicing this, you want to get the right ones. Toy around till you get the right ones. All right. This is for your own practice. And then the last one that we do is this all-important practice quiz, which basically, as I keep saying all the time, contains some of the actual questions that are changed a little bit. So according to the federal law, marijuana is a what drug with a high potential for abuse? Yeah, for now. For now. You are a police officer. You stopped a motor vehicle for speeding. While standing along the open driver's side window, you smell burnt marijuana. A search reveals marijuana in the center console. The driver claims it's not his. You can still take enforcement because the driver is in what? Well, it's neither one of those. It's constructive. 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 Well, those others, constructive and actual, are the 2 that you're going to focus on. Actual is when it's on the person. This and it's constructive when it's in their car or someplace that they have control over. While searching a man who is under arrest for a warrant, you locate a substance that is discovered to be homemade with chemical properties similar to ecstasy. The substance is considered a what? Controlled analog. Remember, homemade with chemical properties. That's a controlled substance analog, like that's K2 spice and those things. Last one. Incident to a lawful arrest. You search Jane and find cocaine in her front left pants pocket. Jane claims it's not hers while stating, "They aren't my pants." Although she was wearing them, whoops, I didn't know that was going to happen. To call her back. That's my sister. I don't know. Sorry about that. Um, She said they're not her pants, although she was wearing them. You still arrest Jane because it's an example of what? Yep, because she's wearing the pants. Should nobody ask whose pants? Whoops, I had to go back. I had to go back. I don't know what happened. I thought I had. Let me go back. Can I go back? Some of these you can't. Okay, let me go. Let me do this. Because number 4, that's the one I want to go back to. Okay, that's okay, let's go back. Start the activity. Okay. Okay, so we said 1. Okay. 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 So now let's go back to 4. Okay. Incidental lawful arrest, you search Jane and find cocaine in her front left pants pocket. She says not hers because they're not her pants. And so you said actual. Yep, because the person has control over it. And that's the key. So you go through those and you study those. All right, I'm going to say good night, but I'm going to give you a key phrase. Any suggestions? That's close. That's right at it, but it's drug laws. That's it. So you were right at it. Give me drug laws and you'll get your points. Okay, very good. Thank you for hanging out today with me and spending this time. I hope that this has been beneficial and will help you. Thank you again. My pleasure as well. So I'm going to say good night to everyone, and I look forward to seeing everybody come out for the last lecture on next Monday. So stay safe and enjoy your week. Know if you have questions, how to do whatever you need to do to reach out to me. Good night.